WION continues to bring you the latest on U.S. election. The U.S. presidential debate is just 2 days away. President Donald Trump and former Vice President Joe Biden are going to take a common floor. Maybe they can learn from some of the historic debate moments that shaped the U.S. politics. Our next story brings you more.
The candidates need no introduction. The Republican candidate, Vice President Richard M. Nixon, and the Democratic candidate, Senator John F. Kennedy.
From Kennedy versus Nixon to Clinton versus Trump, presidential debates have generated special, sometimes career-defining moments, leaving an indelible mark on American politics.
Almost always, every debate cycle I can remember, something happened in one of those debates that, despite the candidate, showed the American people something that they needed to know about the candidate.
For Walter Mondale, it happened twice when he challenged President Ronald Reagan seeking his second term.
Reagan wasn't really following his script very well. And he'd get into these speeches and he'd get lost in the middle of it. He'd forget where he's going.
Understand that 2/3 of the defense budget pays for pay and salary, or pay and pension. And then you add to that food and wardrobe and all the other things, and you only have a small portion going for weapons.
We don't get too many opportunities to see the candidates unfiltered and side by side and on live television without the mediation of journalists or without the handlers right there affecting how and what they say.
Alan Schroeder is a journalism professor at Northeastern University. He wrote a book on TV's role in presidential debates, starting with the first one in 1960 between John Kennedy and Richard Nixon.
Nixon, having just been released a few weeks earlier from the hospital, had lost a lot of weight, was very pallid, didn't really put on the makeup that he should have had put on, and was sweating and was underweight and just didn't look well on camera.
As we know, Nixon refused to have any makeup. And so he looked like he had a shadow. For those who listened on the radio, they thought Nixon won. For those who watched TV, they thought, Kennedy won.
Frank Sesno is director of strategic initiatives at George Washington University and covered the White House for CNN.
There was the famous moment way back when Gerald Ford was running where he tried to suggest that Poland was not part of the Soviet Empire.
There is no Soviet domination of Eastern Europe, and there never will be under a Ford administration.
If you go back and look, the moderator is almost sort of speechless.
Mary Kate Carey teaches political science and is a senior fellow at the University of Virginia Miller Center. She was a speechwriter for the first President George Bush when he debated Ross Perot and Bill Clinton in 1992.
And one of the two of them had violated the rules, was going way over their time, and Carol Simpson was not enforcing the rules. George Bush does one of these, basically starts pointing at his watch as a signal to her to please enforce the rules. And the audience doesn't know the rules, and the audience thinks he's looking at his watch because he's got something better to do and he wants to go get a hamburger or something. And it totally backfired on George Bush.
In this instance, George Bush didn't want to be there. He didn't think he needed to prove himself to the voters in that way. And it's interesting, years later, when he was interviewed by Jim Lehrer about that moment, that's what he said. I didn't want to be there.
Whatever doubts were raised by his performance in his first debate with Mondale in 1984, Ronald Reagan had the last laugh about whether he was too old for the job.
And I want you to know that also I will not make age an issue of this campaign. I am not going to exploit for political purposes my opponent's youth and inexperience.
Yeah, I was laughing about it because I thought it was a joke. And at the same hand, I think he landed a blow there. It was pretty effective. And between my laughter, there were a few tears coming down there.
Mondale lost to Reagan by a landslide. Steve Reddish, VOA News.